Accelerate your agency's profitable growth with tools, tips, and value-added interviews with your host, agency owner and coach, Rob DaCosta.
Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Agency Accelerator. And we are talking all things business development, which is a topic that we've visited a number of times, but is probably one of the most important topics that we can cover. And I'm really excited to have with me today Christian Banach. I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly, Christian. And Christian's been an agency owner, a sales team leader, and a new business development, and his passion is reinvigorating agency leaders and empowering them with confidence in their future. Now, I also noticed, Christian, that you were a concert promoter before that, so I'm really interested to learn how you made the leap from concert promoter to the agency world.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me first and foremost, Rob. Really looking forward to chatting with you here today. But yeah, my career, which I guess is not too different from a lot of people in the agency space. It wasn't something I necessarily set out to do. I started a business, as you had mentioned, in high school, which really was came out of a need that I thought. I was 16, 17 years old and going to some of the, what we call here juice bars, so teen nightclubs, no alcohol, and was really just not happy with the music that was being played at these venues. So decided, I was always entrepreneurial. So the latest incarnation of my entrepreneurialism, even at that age, was, you know what, I'm going to do one of these events on my own. So I gathered a bunch of friends together. We rented a banquet hall out. We booked the DJs that we thought, were interesting and exciting. And the result was, we had 1,000 people show up, and the event went off, incredibly well. So that led to the idea of let's do another one, and then another one. And throughout college, then those events grew from banquet halls into concert venues, and eventually grew into working with artists like Lady Gaga and Pitbull and T-Pain. So some really great award-winning, artists. And that's what the business was for the first, I would say 5, 6, 7 years. But I was then approached by an experiential marketing agency who had a local activation. I'm based in Chicago, and they had something going on in Chicago. They got into a jam, and they needed some people, feet on the street, to help with the activation. They knew we had concert promotion capabilities, which lended itself well to this particular activation. And we said, heck, let's give it a shot. So we went out, we did it, executed it flawlessly for them. That led to then another activation and others, and then other agencies found out about us. And so we were working directly with agencies for a while. But then the light bulb went on is, why are we working with the middleman here? Why don't we try to go directly to the brands ourselves? So fast forward, we ended up working with, some great brands like Allstate and Toyota. And we eventually that business became, half of our business was the concert promotions, and the other half was more of the corporate, experiential, and event marketing. So not something I set out to do, just sort of fell into it, but really, really loved it. And it was really exciting, especially when you're a concert promoter, you're putting your money on the line for all these events. So it was certainly a different way of going about things when you're using, some more corporate dollars to produce some events. So we got a kick out of that.
Yeah, and I reckon a lot of people will be able to relate to your story, not as a concert promoter, but just how circumstance and opportunity leads you in one direction. And I think a lot of people end up running their agencies because they might have started off freelancing and it's grown and they thought, I need some extra resource, and so on and so on. So I just want to start with this question. So we're talking everything to do with business development today. And I want to see, I just said to Christian before we went on air that I suspect Christian and I have very similar outlooks. So it'll be interesting to see if this is the case. So see if you can relate to this. When I meet a prospect, an agency prospect, and I ask them, how do you get your new business? Invariably, they tell me they've got all their business through word of mouth and referral. And they're quite proud about that, puffing up their feathers. And of course, we all know there's some fundamental flaws with that. And they probably hit a brick wall, which is why they've come to talk to you or me. And is that something that you commonly see, that's how they've relied on growing their agency up until the point they engage with you?
Yeah, I would say same boat as you. 95% of the agencies that I speak with have grown through word of mouth and referrals, and it's gotten them to a certain point. However, they inevitably do hit that brick wall, and they're looking for other options on how to grow, or they want to maybe be looking in growth in a certain direction or with a certain type of client, or they just need more leads. But inevitably, at some point that well of referrals and word of mouth, isn't sufficient any further.
Yeah, for sure. And as someone said to me the other day, which I thought was so true, is that word of mouth and referrals is not a strategy.
Mm.
It's just an opportunity, and it's great. And of course, we want to nurture that and all the rest of it. But there's a whole bunch of pitfalls with it, including the quality of the leads and when those leads are going to come in. So you've met this agency. That's their starting point. What do you do with them next? What's your advice, and what journey do you take them through to work out what they should be doing?
Yeah. So, I think, again, I'm in the same boat. I think word of mouth referrals are a bonus is the way I look at it, but it's not a strategy. So one of the first things that we do with our clients is really take a look at and audit the work and body of work that they've had, and really try to understand what we call a pivotal problem. What is the challenge that these companies have been coming for you for you to solve? And we try to find commonalities then between those challenges, and then from there, identifying, what are those pain points? Are you doing anything different in the marketplace with the way you're solving those challenges and those problems? And usually, it's tough sometimes for most agencies to articulate that because they've never really thought about the challenges, that they're actually solving. They know how they're solving them, the work that they're actually doing for, but they don't really know, or they know, but they don't think about, what is that challenge? So that's the first thing that we always do to start off with, is do that audit and try to find some common themes. And from there, we could really start to build out a strategy around those pain points that clients are experiencing.
Yeah. And I think I know the answer to this, but what's your view on how niched an agency should be when, again, you might meet them and they might say, we're a WordPress development agency and that's our niche. And it's like, yeah, is that really niche enough? I don't know. But what's your view on that?
Yeah. I think when you're implementing more of an outbound proactive strategy for new business, it's really critical to have a niche, a specialization, and that might be a sector. You're great at food and beverage. That could be a discipline of marketing. It could be regionality. You're great in a certain market, but usually it's a combination of all of those. I mean, there's just so many agencies that are out there all vying for the same level of business, and to really kind of break through these days, you really have to be an expert in something, or even a couple areas. I don't know if you have to put all your eggs in exactly one basket, but you need at least 2, 3, 4 most special areas of specialization, to really cut through, because these clients are not going to want to work with a generalist agency in most situations, and maybe that was sufficient when you're doing more of a word of mouth referral strategy, because there's some level of trust, and they know you through the referral, so they're more willing to maybe give you some of that work. But if you're trying to get business from a cold prospect, you really have to demonstrate you're an expert at something, or else they're not going to give you really the time of day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and also, if you're a generalist, then how do you differentiate yourself? Well, you differentiate yourself by being cheaper or by promising ridiculous levels of service. And both of those are a recipe for disaster, right?
Absolutely.
So talk to me about some of the outbound communications that works for agencies that you work with, or some of the things that you're seeing working well now. What kind of tactics might you use?
Yeah, it's really what we're seeing is it's a multi-channel, multi-touch based approach. We really are big on cold email. We're still big on cold calling, but both used together. Because it's so easy these days for anybody to fire off an email, and because of that, these executives' inboxes are just flooded. So we also like to use the phone as a strategy. A lot of people say cold calling is dead, and that has not been our experience. We're when working with clients, we're setting and they're setting for themselves a large volume of calls still from the phone. But in addition, it's just another touch point for more of an omni-channel type of approach where they may even respond to you via email. However, that voicemail that you left, may influence them because it makes you stand out from the hundreds of other emails that they may have received from another agency. And the other thing is it's got to be multi-touch as well. I talk with agencies a lot that said, well, we've experimented and we've worked some outbound programs before, but we just didn't get anything out of it. And when I kind of start peeling back the layers of the onion, I find out, they may have fired off one email and, they sort of just expected business to just flow in from there where, we're generally, doing, fairly aggressive sprints of 7, 8, 9 touch points over the period of 30 days or less. And what we're seeing is that that's just what it's going to take. It's because there's just, again, so much noise in the marketplace. And I think agencies should recognize that. You would never just buy a TV ad and run it one time and just assume business is going to flow in, right? You need multiple touches in order to really start to build that awareness and get people to respond. So multi-touch, multi-channel is very important.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously lots of different stats on this, but you need to have like 7 touch points with someone before they're going to engage with you. And like you say, if you're doing that from multiple ways, then you're much more likely to be heard. I think we live in an immediate world at the moment where we want immediate results, we want immediate gratification, and we're distracted by all of these things. And I see that as well, that someone's tried something and they've given up really quickly rather than recognizing that actually I really need to stick with this. I always say, why do you think Coca-Cola's continually advertising Coke on the TV? They don't just need to run one ad that you see once in your life and you'll buy Coke. They need to be front of your mind at the exact moment you're thinking, I could really do with a Coke. And that's when you're going to see the advert. So we need to apply that same sort of strategy to our marketing as well. And there are any other, so that's, you talked about cold emailing, cold calling, any other strategies that you're using with your agencies?
Yeah, I think a couple other things that have really come to light over the last couple of years, especially, is personalization in your outreach, where I think when I was really starting to get heavy into outbound, 5, 6 years ago, it was okay to kind of send out more of a mass email. Maybe you might tailor it to an industry, but you weren't tailoring it necessarily down to the company or the individual. However, that's what we're seeing, in order to cut through these days. So, to kind of piggyback off your, example of Coca-Cola, if you're looking to win a soft drink company, you might have a general email of kind of who you are, what you do, the offer you bring, but when you're reaching out to Coca-Cola, you need to research them and what has the CMO said, what has the CEO said, what are some of the challenges they're experiencing, and you need to personalize it to that particular company. If you're then going to reach out to Pepsi is going to have slightly different challenges than Coke are having, so you got to do the same level of research and then customize that message to Pepsi. It has to be unmistakable that your message was written directly for that company. Otherwise, again, in all of the sea of emails that these executives are getting, you're just going to be deleted. You got to really look like it's a human sending message to a human.
Really interesting. I'm running a workshop in November with a partner, and we're still working on it. But the theme of the workshop is how technology can help personalize your marketing. Mm-hmm. And I guess on the one, if we think of one extreme of completely cold calling or cold contacting, and the other extreme of very personalized researched emails or contacts as you're talking about, what does that middle ground look like, and how can technology kind of help you expedite that? Because there's a lot of great tools out there to help you personalize this in a sort of pseudo way, rather than spending hours just crafting one email that you might want to write. So you meet a client. What do you say to a client when they say to you, hey, Christian, we want to work with you, but we really need business now. So we need some help from you right now because we've got this empty order book and mouths to feed.
Yeah, well, those types of clients I like to try to stay away from because, as much as I wish I had a magic wand that, was able to, win business tomorrow, that's just not the case, right? There is again, obviously a little bit depends on the deal size that you're chasing, but we're typically working with agencies that are working and trying to get 6 and 7 figure opportunities. So there's a sales cycle involved. Even if I was to get tomorrow, the CMO of Coca-Cola on the phone, you're talking 3, 6, 9, maybe more months before they're ready, and there's nothing you can really do to speed that process up. Some of the lower ticket, items, there's a lower sales cycle involved in that. So I think, you have to go into it with a long-term strategy. I don't think to relate it, if you were taking an SEO strategy, you would never, engage, an SEO program and expect, the next day that, you're going to post a blog and then business is just going to, fly in and your Google rankings are going to go to number one. It takes time.
Yeah.
Now with that being said, I think compared to other strategies, outbound is, because it is more of a direct response, you can really, start generating those meetings, very quickly. But in terms of that converting into closed business, that's something that's going to take, a little bit of longer time. But we also advise our clients to really think about, we think of it almost like a baseball, analogy, try to get to first base first. And that's really that first meeting, that first conversation. But you have to go into that, with second base in mind. And second base might be a smaller consulting project, something, very easy for them to buy. Don't expect to go from first meeting to an AOR opportunity right out of the gates. That's probably not going to happen. But if you can start with smaller, engagements and then build trust along the way, that's a really great strategy to, speed up that sales cycle, at least get some revenue incoming, quicker than later. So we're working a lot of times on our clients in that and really trying to think about what is that second base, offer that you could be putting out there.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I sometimes do an interesting piece of work with my clients where we use a time to conversion calculator to help them work out how long does it take from a lead coming into their world to actually converting into a client. And when they work that out, most people are really surprised. Like I did it for myself and I worked out that it was about 11 months. Mm-hmm. And that means, okay, if it's 11 months from someone learning about who I am to buying from me, then what am I doing in that 11-month period to keep nurturing and moving that contact through the buyer's journey? And again, I think people live in an immediate world, but I kind of laughed when I asked you that question. You answered it like we try and stay away from them, because I kind of do as well, because probably quite quickly that they don't have very realistic expectations, or they think you have a magic wand to suddenly solve their problem. I always say to people, if they have that problem, I say the best thing you can do is reach out to past clients, reach out to people you've worked with in the past and see if you can re-engage with them, because that's probably your best bet to get some business quickly.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And, I think what we're oftentimes doing now with some clients is it's still a very much an outbound proactive way to nurture your own network. And what we see a lot of clients they've done a great job building their network, say on LinkedIn. They are connected with a lot of great decision makers. And what happens with those contacts, right? So, you might have people that worked at your agency that went client side. You might have junior people that were your day-to-day that have now been promoted into, more senior decision-making roles. You have other clients that have moved on to other agencies. So I think, with referrals and word of mouth, you're kind of hoping that they come back to you. But you can still go and mine that network of your own and proactively reach out and try to start conversations with that. And you would really be surprised on, the movement that has happened probably in your network. And, most executives are not very good. They're so busy doing client work that they're not nurturing their network. So I think if you want to do something quick, I think that's probably the best way. It's still not going to probably be tomorrow, but because they have some level of trust and they like you and they know you already, the sales cycles are, truncated compared to, a true cold outreach.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that sometimes people are looking for the juicy fruit in the top of the tree for their new clients, but meanwhile there's some ripe fruit that's fallen on the ground that actually is at their feet that they could be nurturing, and that using things like LinkedIn is a really great example of that. I think so many of us don't do that very well and don't do it consistently. So let me ask another question, because you might have a differing view to me on this one. So sometimes a client says to me, Rob, we're thinking about hiring a business development person in-house. What do you think? And how would you respond to that question? If they're
Yeah,
like an SME agency size, sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry.
If they're like an SME sized, a small to mid-sized agency.
Yeah, I think if they're a small agency, I think it could be a dangerous proposition. If I really think that at a small agency size, the principal or principals really need to be, in charge of new business. They're going to sell the agency the best. I think we've run into a lot of situations where they kind of go out and they expect, this biz dev director, I call him kind of the one with the magic Rolodex, that supposedly has all these contacts. And rarely do I see that work out very well. I can't tell you that there's a certain size that I would recommend. I mean, I would say, if you're, maybe 12 or more people might be a good place where you might want to start thinking about a new business director. Below that, I think it really needs to be spearheaded by, the agency's senior leadership, probably the principal. Not to say that, there aren't other resources, other outsourced, type of companies, that you might want to think about engaging to help at least generate those leads, because we understand the principal is wearing a lot of different hats. Prospecting may not be, their skill set may not even be something they have the time to do. But at the end of the day, they're going to need to be the ones to kind of reel in, and nurture that business and close that business. And once you get a little bit bigger, I think you can start, thinking about, bringing someone from the outside in to help, on a full-time basis.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on that?
To be honest, and for the listeners, I didn't prompt Christian to say that, by the way. Exactly the same. To be quite honest, and this is why I was interested to hear your perspective. To be quite honest, I've heard more horror stories of people hiring business development people who by their own nature are probably good salesmen when it comes to the recruitment process. So they promise the earth, but then they become a very expensive resource and they don't deliver the results. And I often see there becomes a conflict between the marketing person that they might have and the biz dev person, because the biz dev blames marketing for not having given them all the tools or the decks that they need. And I say exactly the same thing. Look, business owner, you are the best person to sell your agency. You can sell it with passion, you can sell it with belief, and it's not one of those challenges that you should be outsourcing. And my advice to people is hire marketing people before you hire business development people, because you need to have all of the marketing tactics and assets in place to support that. So I completely agree with what you've said. And unfortunately, I've seen more examples of where it hasn't worked and where it's cost the agency, six figures to hire and get rid of them, and they brought very little in. So yeah, I agree. Let me just ask you a question, changing tact a bit. How have you seen the business development landscape change over the last couple of years with coronavirus and remote working and all that? Have things changed? Have the way we do things changed?
Yeah, I have seen some differences. I think one of the things that is interesting, and we'll see how this plays out over time. But there was a belief by a lot of companies and agencies that you had to work with someone that's in your driving distance, basically from where you work. And now with everybody working remotely and proving that model could work in most situations, there just is a general sense that that is not as important anymore. That if you're really great at something, it doesn't matter if you're one down the block or you're 1,000 miles away. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think that also lends itself to that specialization even more, because they're willing to seek you out no matter where you're at, versus maybe they were working with generalist agencies just because they were close to them before. So that's one thing that we're certainly seeing now, and again, we'll see how it plays out over time. I think another thing that's been interesting as well is just because at least for what we do, a lot of is working with agencies to kind of start that that top of the funnel, build the relationships, And, there was just so much travel going on before with executives traveling from meeting to meeting and speaking at conferences that we've actually found it to be easier, to get on their calendars now because they're at home more. It's easier for them to jump on a 30-minute Zoom call because they're not on a plane somewhere or they're not at meeting with other clients. So again, we'll see as travel starts to pick up more, how that plays out over time as well. But those are a couple of different things that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of personally, my work has changed so much. It must be the case for you as well. Whereas before I would, spend 2 hours driving into London and spending a couple of hours with a client and maybe seeing two clients that day and then heading home. Now, I can have a day where I can see 6 or 7 clients if I need to, not that I want to do that in one day. It just reminds me of how much more efficient we can be. But as you say, when we're recording this episode, we're just at the point of the world sort of opening up again. So it will be interesting to see where it lands when the sort of pendulum swings back to wherever it's going to swim. But I don't know how it is in the US at the moment, Christian, but over here, there's a massive skill shortage. One of the most frequent conversations I'm having with my clients, if it's not around sales, it's around people and recruitment. And it's just tough to recruit people at the moment. So hiring remote workers just opens up a whole new opportunity.
Yeah, we're seeing that's the number one challenge that we're actually seeing right now is this huge talent shortage, here in the U.S. And quite frankly, then it's putting pause on some new business efforts because they can't service the current clients that they have, right now because they're running out of team members to work on the work. So it's kind of put this, but they also see the future. This is not, we need new business to keep growing. So it's kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't type of situation here. But yeah, hopefully that changes. I think, with remote work as well, that's a whole nother can of worms there about, agencies. I speak with some that are very traditional and want to go back to the office and wants everybody working in the office. Others that have decided we want to go fully remote. But I think there's a general sense from a lot of agency staffers that they want to work remote, and those companies and those agencies that don't do that, I think might be at a disadvantage. And those that do embrace it could get access to talent that they never could have gotten previously because they just they weren't in that regionality of theirs. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I think people just need to open their eyes to solving the challenge in different ways. I was talking to one of my clients who's an SEO agency this morning, and they're hiring a lot of people from Eastern Europe now, and and because they can, paying the same salary they'd pay in the UK, they can hire the absolute best people in Eastern Europe, and whereas in the UK they'd be hiring kind of starter to mid-level people, and so that's a strategy that's working well for them. And obviously they can be based wherever, and we have technology like this to communicate more effectively. Let's just wrap this up. I just want to put you on the spot for a moment and ask you, if you were talking to an agency and they're trying to do business development themselves, have you got any other tips for them besides the things that you've already shared with us today? Any advice to them about their business development?
I think there's really three things that are critical. One is, like I mentioned earlier, is getting really clear on the problems that you solve for clients. That's number one. Number two then is, really getting clear then on the type of clients that what we call, the right to win. Not necessarily you want to win, that client, but you have a right to win them. So really, again, getting clear on the types of companies, the sizes, the locations, whatever it is it means for you, categories. So that's the second thing. And then the third, which is often kind of overlooked, that, if you're really, again, trying to do a more proactive approach, like we've been talking about, these executives are very busy. So think about how you can leverage your thought leadership, your subject matter experts. If you have proprietary research or tools, how do you use that, in order to open up a door? We talk about leaving a deposit before you make a withdrawal. So how do you reach out and offer your prospects something that will help them, give them value, and use that really to start a relationship? And I don't want to think about, I don't like the term lead generation for what we do. I really think about it more of relationship generation. And I think if you think of it in that regard, think more long-term, you'll see a lot better, success than trying to be really transactional.
Yeah, there's a couple of really good quotes I need to steal from you there, because I really like that idea of making a deposit before you make a withdrawal. It's so true. It's like value first, right? Lead with value. Deliver something that demonstrates you know what you're talking about, that actually can help your prospects. Then they're much more likely to engage with you, rather than just thinking of, oh my God, selling is selling and I've got to sell to them, because you're never going to get anywhere with that.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you the last question I ask all my guests. If you could go back in time and give that younger Christian who's just starting out in business a piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. Funny, interesting enough, actually, my parents, who are getting older now, were in town last week, and I asked them that same question, what advice they would give themselves. And they turned around and then they asked me after they answered, and like I didn't have an answer, ready at the time, so I had to do some thinking about it. And funny you asked me this question, because I literally just went through this. But what I had shared with them, and I'll share with here today, is I think for me, it's really keeping and more of an open mind. I think when I was younger, I felt maybe I knew everything, that I didn't maybe need to have, as wide of experiences that I see today. And I think that's what I would teach or want to tell myself. I think there were some opportunities that I just completely overlooked or dismissed, because I thought I had it all figured out back then, and I really, obviously, I didn't. So that's the advice that I would give. I don't know if I would have listened to myself.
See, that was going to be my next question. This is a question I've started asking everybody. Do you think your younger self would have actually listened to that? But that is a really good bit of advice. And I was just saying to Christian before we went on the show that I'm collating all this feedback into ready for our 100th episode, to include all the feedback from all the guests. And almost, I don't think anybody has ever said the same thing. And I can gladly confirm that no one has said that before, Christian. So that's really interesting, but a really good bit of advice, because, when we're younger, we can be quite cocky and quite cocksure. And sometimes that kind of youthful, ignorant arrogance serves as well, because we just blindly go on and do things. And I sometimes think now, being old and grey, that I wouldn't have the courage to do some of the things I did when I was younger. But also, being a bit more open-minded and listening to those who have got a bit of grey hair is probably not a bad idea at all. So listen, Christian, we need to wrap things up now. Really appreciate your time today. If the listeners wanted to find out more about your Get in Touch, where would they go?
Yeah, I think the best place to go would be my website, christianbanach.com. From there, we have a free agency growth masterclass. You could subscribe and get weekly updates on different CMOs that have been recently appointed. So that's a great resource. Obviously, there's links to all the different social channels that I'm on there, but I think my website is really the hub, where I think would be the best place to start.
Good. And that's what I tell all my clients. Your website should be the central hub of everything. So we'll include that link into the show notes so people can find it. But I just want to say a big thank you for giving up your time today to join us on the Agency Accelerator podcast. I know our listeners will have found that really useful, because I got a few really great nuggets from it as well. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.